It's a pleasure to be here with you today because I'm so excited to play a small part in making history with you when you elect Joni to the United States Senate. I just met her for the first time today, but I've been reading about her, checking her out, and I like what I see, what I hear, and I know now that I've met her, she is going to be a force in the United States Senate. So I'm just so grateful to be a small part of it. You learned that I was a native Iowan, born in Burlington, raised in Muscatine. My dad was a John Deere dealer. My grandparents, anybody know where Boxholm is? Anybody know where Dayton is? That's where I spent my summers, on the farm, up there with my grandparents and aunts and uncles that farmed. And I still own a little piece of Iowa. I go through here every summer, 8 or 9 times, to go to my cabin over in Wapello, Iowa. And so property owners still over there. Love my native state. It just happens that my husband's life's work took us to Nebraska, where started a little grassroots efforts, helping my Republican Party. Like all of you are going to do, you're going to help your candidate here, and it's the grassroots that really makes it happen. My grassroots over there led me from being that helper to this candidate, that candidate, to being a chief of staff to a governor, to being the state treasurer, and then to being the governor. And it was during that time of Ronald Reagan. I was a delegate for him in 76, 80, 84, and he asked me in 88 to chair the Republican National Platform Committee. Then we have excitement in Nebraska because we made history 2 years ago. We elected a woman to the United States Senate, and I'm going to introduce her to you. Her name is Deb Fischer, and she was well prepared to take on the United States Senate seat. She started running the minute she got there. Wasn't long, and she was before the cameras in January after taking office earlier and giving the response to the GOP. She's already a force, but she wants help. That's why she's here. She wants you to get Joni to join her there. Deb started out as, many of us did, wife, mother. She was born and raised in Lincoln, but she married wisely. She married Bruce and went out to the ranch in Valentine, Nebraska. And I think that gave her a dimension to her whole person, to her whole strength that she brings with her in her political career. She didn't finish college right away when she married, as often is the case with women, but she got her mother to move up to the ranch so she could go back to Lincoln and she could finish her degree. It's the kind of family they are. And they're pretty close. You find in Iowa, you talk long enough, you're going to have somebody that you know that you've never met before, that you're related somehow, or you're friends. Well, I hired her father as my chief engineer for the Department of Roads. He came out of retirement to do that job. Great guy, wonderful public servant. And when he came to one of our first administrative little party gatherings at the mansion, he introduced his wife, and she said, and her name was Strobel. That's Deb Fischer's maiden name. He said, "This is my wife, Mrs. Strobel, Flo." And I said, "Oh, it's nice to meet you, Mrs. Strobel." And she looked at me and she says, "Mrs. Strobel." And I went, "Oh, that Mrs. Strobel. She was my daughter's second grade teacher." I mean, my daughter was always coming home saying, "Mrs. Strobel this, Mrs. Strobel that." Well, the reason I tell you all that, it's important. Family. That's where you get those deep-seated convictions, your moral character, the set of principles by which you live. And that's the kind of person Deb Fischer is. Well, she went on to run for the legislature, and I watched with great interest as she assumed responsibility. She was chair of the Transportation Committee and Telecom Committee, and she helped Governor Heineman over there give one of the biggest tax increases in our state. She also put in place a great roads program. The infrastructure in any state is important, and she did that without any additional without bonding and without increasing our taxes. So she's had a great record. When she came up in 2012 to run, she was running against two men who had won statewide office more than once. One former Attorney General, one the current Attorney General, and one who is currently the state treasurer. And Deb put her name in and they went, who? Oh, yes, Deb Fisher. Well, she doesn't have a chance. I mean, those guys got big war chests. I mean, they've won statewide races before. Well, they learned. Deb Fisher worked hard. She didn't give up her legislative seat to do so either. She stayed because the voters had sent her there for that term. She finished out the term, but every weekend she was on the road, traveling thousands of miles, and because of her good reputation she had built as a state legislator and the convincing way she could speak to the people of the state, just like Joni's going to do for you, she was elected. It was an astonishing win. And I tell you, she is now a force in the United States Senate. She can't do it alone. We got to work all across this nation to send good conservative people. And I am so grateful for She-PAC that has helped support conservative women to send. So Deb Fisher's here to introduce a very special guest, and I hope you will join in giving a good Iowa welcome to my United States Senator, Senator Deb Fisher.